Hey everyone, I'm Daniel from UCI's blockchain organization.
And this is Hannah from Europe Blockchain Society at the University of Washington.
And today we'll be talking about NFTs on NEAR. A brief overview of the topics we'll be going over today is firstly an introduction to the basics of NFT technology, then exploring popular use cases of NFTs on NEAR. After that, we'll be going over the process of minting NFTs on NEAR, and then going in depth into NEAR's NEP 171 standard. So what are NFTs? The actual acronym stands for non-fungible token. This token is stored on a blockchain, which is a decentralized distributed ledger of information and transactions. This technology allows the linking of ownership to a unique digital asset through a token on the blockchain. Many popular examples include art pieces, videos, and collectibles. So why are NFTs so popular? So traditional digital collectible rights are usually stored in a centralized organization and backed up by a paper document. This is an extremely slow process with tons of third-party organizations and loopholes. NFT technology expedites this process by eliminating the intermediaries and providing services on a decentralized blockchain, helping eliminate potential fraud and forgery. The process of how NFTs are created are through a process called minting. These are created through the use of smart contracts, which are basically programs on the blockchain. Smart contracts then assign ownership of the newly created NFTs and can be programmed to do other things as well, such as royalty rewards, transfers, and approvals.
And next up we have the use cases of NFTs, for a popular NFT project on the NEAR ecosystem. So NFTs are not just arbitrarily valid JPEG images. It can also be used for real life things as voting, event tickets, for gaming, for metaverse applications, as well as business. And then the biggest marketplace on NEAR is Paras. And there are a few examples of NFT projects on there, such as FX Social Egg Club, the Undead Army, the Mara Gen Zero. Just for some data and statistics, the Undead Army collection, it has over 26,000 NEAR total traded volume, which equates to 112 Ether. And then we also have NFT on different networks. And some that include Ethereum, Solana, Polygon, and NEAR. Ethereum is one of the most popular blockchain, and some of their popular NFT projects include Bored Ape Yacht Club, the Azuki, the CryptoPunk. But one downside of the Ethereum network is that it has really high gas fees, and the transactional loads can cause environmental impact. And then for Solana, it has fast transactional speed, low transaction fees, and it is susceptible to shut down high TPS. And for Polygon, it also has low gas fees, but however, the demand for Polygon chain is very low. And then of course we have NEAR. NEAR is capable of handle a large amount of transactions, and it is able to scale projects with its sharding technology. It also as well have very low gas fees. It is carbon neutral. And a bonus point about NEAR is that it has human readable account ID, such as bench.near, which is like a wallet address. And then next up we have DOT Hero, which is a NEAR tutorial series written by Benj Perez. And I would love to have Benj to take off the question from here.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for the invite. Yeah, so my name's Ben. I work for NEAR under the developer relations team. I joined a little bit over probably 8 months ago. I've been really involved in the NEAR ecosystem and the NFT ecosystem from before then. I started a company called Fair, which will be launching later this year, focused on bringing charitable organizations and impact into the NFT space. And from there, I've been working with NFTs for over a year and a half now. And so I've been sort of considered the NFT expert on NEAR, I guess some people say, but yeah, so I wrote this tutorial, Zero to Hero, which essentially goes through all of the aspects of starting with a skeleton smart contract, or actually even starting with a pre-deployed contract and learning everything that you need to know about NFTs. So you walk through, a contract architecture, starting from like a skeleton contract, and then you walk through and implement all of the different standard extensions as well as the core standard for NFTs on NEAR. So the NEP 171 standard. It's a great tutorial. It's pretty long, in depth. So if you want to check it out, you can. It's on our docs. But I'll just be going through some of the sort of higher level aspects of the tutorial now. So if you could go to the next slide here. So in this brief presentation, I'll just be going through a little bit about the contract architecture. So talking about the skeleton contract that you get when you first start, talking about the main lib.rs file, which sort of connects everything together. And then I'll go through a little bit about how NFTs are actually minted, some of the metadata that's outlined in the standard, and what information is actually stored on chain. And then from there, I'll go through and talk about the enumeration standard, which essentially just talks about how you can query information and what the standard dictates that you can query from the blockchain once you've minted an NFT. I'm not going to be going through in depth anything too crazy or going through the actual standards such as the approval standard or the royalty standard. I'll give pretty brief overviews at the end, but this is just meant to tackle the idea of just minting an NFT, having it on the blockchain, but not being able to transfer it or have any of the approval extensions and stuff like that. This is just at its very core how an NFT is minted and actually put on chain. So a little bit about the contract architecture. So the NFT tutorial is broken up into a bunch of different files that basically just outline the different standards. So you have the approval standard, the enumeration standard, the metadata standard, the core standard, the royalty standard. Minting is not actually part of the standard, but you need to be able to mint NFTs somehow. But we decided to keep it a little bit open-ended so people can do whatever they want in order to mint NFTs. But this is just one example implementation of that. And so today I'll talk about the lib.rs file, the mint.rs file, the metadata, and the enumeration standard. And then in the actual contract architecture, there's the cargo.toml, which is basically how you import all of your packages kind of thing. So, if you need Serif or JSON or anything like that, it's kind of like NPM for all of you Node users and stuff like that. But yeah, and then there's a build script, which essentially allows you to compile your contract down into WebAssembly and then deploy that to the chain, right? And then you've got all of the files that I had mentioned before. So the skeleton contract, when you first open up this NFT tutorial, you're going to be greeted with a complete skeleton architecture. So all of the functions that you need in order to complete the tutorial, but every function is blank and there's comments saying, fill this in and to do kind of thing. So as you go through the tutorial and as you navigate through this skeleton contract, you'll go through and you'll read through the docs and you'll implement what we'll give you code snippets. You'll implement that. You'll build the contract. You'll deploy it, and you'll learn exactly what the thought process was when I made these contracts, and how you can then, if you really understand and you go through the tutorial, you can sort of branch off and then you can start to make some of your own things that you want, which is pretty cool. So the skeleton contract is just the bare bones contract that you need, outlines all the functions, and then you go and you implement it later. So the main file, so this is the lib.rs file. And so this is what outlines what information is going to be stored on the contract. It links all of the files. So the approval.rs, royalty.rs, it's what links all of that. You can think of it as this sort of hub that, it branches off into these different files, pulls information, outlines different functions and stuff like that. But yeah, so the lib.rs file is the sort of core of your contract. And that's what, basically all the contracts on NEAR written in Rust, have is this lib.rs file where you can outline all your information. And this is where you define some of your functions, some of your traits and stuff like that. And then it also is where you generally define your initialization functions. So when you first deploy your contract to the blockchain, you need to initialize it somehow. So if you store, for example, let's say you had a super simple smart contract that just stored messages, right? So it stored just one message in state. and it's stored in owner, for example. And so when you initialize the contract, you need to pass in some of the default values that these data structures are going to have once it's deployed to the blockchain. And so this is where you can define some of these initialization functions. So this is an example of what information we're going to be storing on chain for the contract. So this is in the lib.rs file. So we have our struct, which is our contract, and it's going to keep track of a bunch of information. So, the owner of the contract, a list of tokens, all this information needs to be stored on the contract. And then, as I had mentioned before, the initialization functions is what actually defaults these values to, start. It's like, what are these values going to start at when the contract is deployed? Most of them are going to start off as like empty maps or empty sets and stuff like that. But for example, the owner ID you need to initialize that with an owner of the contract. So a little bit about some of the information that we're going to be storing, right? So as I had mentioned, the owner of the contract. So you want to store that in case the owner needs to make any changes or something like that, or there's owner-only methods. So for example, you could have an NFT contract where you have an allow list of people that can mint NFTs. You don't want anyone to just be able to mint NFTs, but you also don't want anyone to just be able to add people to that allow list. So storing the owner of the contract allows you to then check to make sure that the person that signed the transaction is the owner, and it allows you to sort of gatekeep who can call what functions in the contract. And then the tokens per owner field, it basically just maps an account ID to a set of tokens, right? So if Benji had like 15 tokens, right, you would map Benji to those 15 tokens. So the contract can keep track of, what tokens any specific owner owns. And this is just a token ID, right? And then you can keep track of like tokens by ID. So for a given token ID, you keep track of like the token information, right? So not only are you keeping track of what token IDs a specific account has, but you're also keeping track of, for any given token ID, what information does the contract hold for that? And that's outlined in the metadata standard kind of thing. So, and then of course, there's the token metadata by ID. So we chose to keep this separately just for ease of use and ease of implementation, because you don't necessarily need all of the information, for a given token ID everywhere in the contract. And sometimes you only need the metadata for a token ID. So we chose to keep that separate. It's not really important. And then there's the actual metadata of the contract itself, right? So I'll talk a little bit about the metadata coming up, but yeah, that's a little bit about what is actually stored on the contract level. So now there's minting, right? So if you opened up the skeleton contract, or you're going through the tutorial, you'll see this NFT mint function, right? And this is what you need to fill in as you go through the tutorial. And so this is what's actually going to be linking up an owner to a token. So if you were to think back of some of the information that we stored in the contract, right, we now need to turn all of that into an NFT. So whenever this function is called, you pass in the token ID that you want. And so this is just a string, right? It could be like foo, it could be bar, it could be, token _6, it can be whatever you want, right? So this is the token ID. And then you've got the metadata for the token, which I'll outline in the next slide, and then the receiver. So for any given token, right, we're going to insert the token object that contains the passed in token ID, the passed in metadata, and then the passed in receiver. So this is what actually links all of that information and stores it on the contract, right? So once you call mint, the contract will have all of this information in state. It'll be there, forever. It's on the blockchain, and it knows that this person owns this NFT. And then all we need to do is we need to go through and implement enumeration methods in order to actually view this information at any given time by anyone. So a little bit about the metadata. So this is going to basically outline all of the information that you need to store on the contract in terms of like the token metadata or the contract metadata. So if you remember back when I said we map a token ID to a token object, right? So the token ID is mapped to a bunch of information about the token. So that, for example, is the JSON token, right? So this is just what will be returned. It's JSON token because it gets serialized to JSON and they get sent back in our enumeration methods. It's for optimization purposes, but some of the information that we're going to keep, right, is the token ID, the owner, the metadata, any approved account IDs that have access to transfer this token on your behalf, and then any of the royalties that you store. So all of this information is stored for every token ID. And this is what's going to get sent back whenever you view information about this token, right? And then the actual token metadata. So this is actually what's defined in the standard, the metadata extension of the standard. So for any given NFT, you have a bunch of different optional parameters that you can store, right? Or optional fields that you can store on chain. And so this is that token struct on the right. So you can store the title of the NFT, the description, a link to the media hash, the number of copies, when it was issued, when it expires. All this information can be stored on chain. They're all optional. So for example, maybe you don't have a number of copies, or you don't care about when it expires. Maybe it never expires, or there's nothing extra. These are all optional fields, but at its very core, a bunch of NFTs will probably have a title, a description, and a media. So that's just some of the information that's stored and is outlined in the metadata standard. And then a little bit about the enumeration methods. So, let's say you've minted this NFT and it's stored on the contract. Now you need some way to be able to actually query this information and return it to your front end. So dApps will use this, the NEAR wallet will use this. Basically, any time you want to get information about your NFTs, you're going to use one of the enumeration methods. And so the standard defines a bunch of different enumeration methods, such as, how do I get the total number of NFTs that are minted on the contract? How do I get the total number of NFTs that a specific owner has? And then, be able to paginate through NFTs, both on the contract level. So let's say I just wanted to, list, let's say you had a marketplace, right? And I knew that the contract ID, and I wanted to display all of the NFTs and have it paginated. So person could be clicking next, and go through a bunch of NFTs, right? And so this basically allows you to do this. And so this is outlined in the standard. It essentially allows you to query for a bunch of tokens that are paginated. And so the picture at the bottom left, this is if you were to mint an NFT, but you didn't implement any of the enumeration standards. And so this is in the NEAR wallet. You can go through and view your collectibles, but you see that there's no NFT there. And if you actually opened up, the dev tools and in Chrome, for example, it would say, method not found, because you're not actually implementing that method that allows you to query for that information. And it allows the wallet to then display and render this NFT. And then on the right, this is what happens if you were to actually implement that enumeration standard. And so in the Zero to Hero tutorial, we go through, we implement the mint method. And then at the end, we're like, hey, look, your token doesn't show up in the wallet. Why is that? We explain why. We explain then how you can upgrade your contract. So you can redeploy and make sort of patch fixes to your contract. And then once you've deployed that fix and you refresh the wallet page, it'll correctly be able to view that NFT, and then everything will be fine and dandy. And then one last thing that I'll talk about very briefly is just some of the extensions to the standard. So we have the event standard, which basically is emitting events, so logs that you can listen in for. So for example, let's say you had a marketplace or something, and you had your own database, and you wanted to synchronize with the blockchain, and you wanted to keep everything synchronized. And so you could listen in for these events anytime an NFT is minted, anytime something is transferred, anytime something is sold or something like that, or burnt, right? So it would the contract would emit this event that you can listen for, and then you'll basically know whenever things are happening on the contract, right? So that's one of the standard extensions. There's also the approval management standard. So this allows you to approve a different account ID to transfer this token on your behalf, right? So it's basically acting as like an escrow account kind of thing. And this is how basically all of the marketplaces work on NEAR, which is a great segue into the royalties and marketplaces section. So a very common approach to developing out a marketplace on NEAR is you'll mint an NFT, and then you'll allow the marketplace access to transfer the token on your behalf. And then someone will go to the marketplace, it'll be listed, and they'll purchase the NFT. The marketplace will then it'll transfer that NFT to the purchaser because it has access to transfer that NFT on your behalf. And that's basically how NFTs are sort of how marketplaces work on NEAR. And then there's the royalty standard, which basically allows you to set royalties for whenever a token is sold. A portion of the proceeds can go to these accounts and all that fine stuff there. And all of that is outlined in this link that I have here on Nomicon under the standards /token/non-fungible token section. And then this link is specifically the core standard, which allows you to just transfer tokens straight up. But yeah, that's a little bit about the Zero to Hero and a little bit about NFTs on NEAR. Thanks.
Oh, awesome. Thank you guys for listening. And here are our socials if you want to follow our organizations as well.
Yeah, and thank you for listening. And you should follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn Instagram pages.
Just
So,
before maybe we end it, do you have any advice, Ben, on how people can get involved on the NFT space, how they can join the, on NEAR specifically, how they can join the ecosystem, how they can get engaged?
Yeah, sure. So we've got a bunch of, so there's, I don't have any of the links handy that I can just post, but there's this website called, for example, Awesome NEAR, which outlines a bunch of the different, a bunch of the different decentralized applications that are working on NEAR. So you could go out, you can join, maybe interact with some of their platforms. They've got a bunch of them have testnet versions of the site. So if you don't want to spend real money, you can use a bunch of test tokens and you can purchase and play around with those marketplaces and those NFT platforms. There's also their Discord. So Awesome NEAR will outline some of their Discords on the socials if you want to, get in contact with some of the owners and some of the founders and stuff like that. We also have Discord, which is huge. This is where I spend most of my time on DevRel. Is I answer pretty much any questions that anyone has about NEAR and about NFTs and stuff like that. But I'd say, and that's, I think you can find it at, actually, I don't have the link handy. I'll post it here when I'm done talking. But yeah, so there's the NEAR Discord. And then probably my greatest suggestion is to go through some of the tutorials that we have in Docs and just play around, get messy, really start to understand some of the things that you can do with NFTs, go through the zero to hero, and then maybe expand upon it, maybe introduce some different features. I talk about maybe a marketplace. And just the other day, I had a user asking, how can I implement timed auctions, for example, and bidding and all that good stuff. And so maybe going through the zero to hero and then expanding on some of the topics that were outlined in that tutorial and maybe sort of playing around with things, trying to get messy and just really diving into the ecosystem. And also don't be afraid to ask anyone in Discord or, Twitter, Telegram. There's all these amazing resources out there. And if you have any questions, just feel free to ask.
Nice. Does anyone have any question for Ben or Daniel or Anna? Oh, I guess not. I have few. I mean, if you don't mind, I was curious, kind of maybe if you can talk about how you went into NEAR, how you get passionate about NFT and about your projects, what you are doing now, Ben. I think that would be super interesting to hear a little bit more about yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, I got together with a prof at the University of Waterloo in Canada, and we were. This was right at the start of the huge crypto sort of NFT boom, and we were talking, and there was a clear sort of opportunity there for charities and charitable organizations, because the crypto economy is a multi-trillion-dollar economy, and charities are really not that involved in it, because oftentimes they're not as technologically advanced and not as early to a bunch of the technology. And so that was sort of a plan that we had, was how can we introduce charities and introduce some of the nonprofits and and basically just create an impact for NFTs. And so we've been working ever since. And we didn't know about NEAR at the time, so we did a whole bunch of research, tried to find something. One of our number one priorities was finding something that was not environmentally detrimental, because it's kind of ironic where if you're doing, for example, if you have an environmental charity and you're working on a blockchain that's harming the environment, that is kind of, it sucks, right? And so we did a bunch of research and we stumbled across NEAR. This was before they actually launched on mainnet, and got really, really, really excited because of all of the amazing technology and some of the really, really awesome bright minds working on the project. And it basically aligned with our values. And so I started to get, by this point, I had never been involved in the sort of crypto space, never written a smart contract in my life. And so really, we just started messing around with things. We set up some meetings with some of the developers, and then I got in contact with this fellow, Matt Lockyer, and I started helping. And right at the time, he was building out an NFT marketplace, the very, very first sort of implementation NFT marketplace that pretty much every single DApp uses today on NEAR. And I was helping him out. I found a bunch of bugs, and I really fell in love with the smart contract development. And, we'd been working on that for a really, really long time. And at the end, he was like, hey, Benji, you should work for NEAR. And I was like, yeah, you know what, maybe we'll see. Because I was still in school and still am. I'm currently in my 3rd year at University of Waterloo. But yeah, so I was like, hey, you know what, maybe I'll give this a go. So I started to work at NEAR last year and been working there ever since, and been just really, really, really involved in the NFT space, helping out develop some of the standards, and talking with projects and potential partners that want to get involved with NEAR. Just the other day, I finished this pretty cool project on link drops, where you can link drop an NFT and a fungible token, which basically allows you to bypass all of the onboarding experience. You just send someone a link, they can create an account with it, preload some NEAR, preload some NFTs, preload some fungible tokens if you want. But yeah, so that's really my story up until this point. I've been going to a bunch of conferences. If you're going to Consensus, I'll see you there. And yeah, that's really me.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing. You told me that you're trying to bridge kind of the environment and the charities together. Are you working at FAIR projects kind of to follow this vision?
Yeah, that's the company that we started. It's called FAIR. Very fitting name. It's trying to be fair, make the world a little bit of a better place. But yeah, we haven't launched yet. We just had a closed beta. But yeah, it's a little bit about it. It's going to be a platform where you can go and you can purchase NFTs for a specific charity. And anywhere from the minimum is 45% goes to the charity, and then maximum is like 97.5% goes to the charity. So it's extremely charitable focused, and you can get tax receipts and stuff like that. It's basically just going to be a platform where you can learn more about some of the charitable organizations and what they're doing if you're not as informed in the charity space. So it's an aspect for learning more. It's an aspect for donating if you want to, and then for artists to donate to some of the causes that they're passionate about. So we're running an event coming up with a Haitian artist, where the proceeds of her artwork are going to go to Hope for Haiti, for example. But yeah, it's all going to be about charities and super charitable focused, and bridging the gap between charities and connecting them to the NFT and crypto space. Thanks everyone for coming. Again, if you have any questions, you can find me on the NEAR Discord, or just shoot me a message on whatever you find me, LinkedIn. You can email me at ben.kurik@near.org if you have any questions. But thanks everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time, and yeah, just let me know if you have any questions.
Perfect. Thank you.